Hare. Let's try it again. Hare. Of Hari, the personality of Godhead. Guna, transcendental attribute. Ashipta, being absorbed in. Mati, mind. Bhagavan, powerful. Badarayani, the son of Vyasadeva. Adyagat, underwent studies. Mahat, great. Akyanam, narration. Nityam, regularly. Vishnu Jana, devotees of the Lord. Priyaha, beloved. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Srila Vyasadeva, was not only transcendently powerful, that doesn't sound English, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Srila Vyasadeva, was not only transcendently powerful, he was also very dear to the devotees of the Lord. Thus he underwent the study of this great narration, Srimad Bhagavatam. Please repeat. Srila Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Srila Vyasadeva, was not only transcendently powerful, he was also very dear to the devotees of the Lord. Thus he underwent the study of this great narration, Srimad Bhagavatam. Purport. According to Brahma Vaivarta Purana, Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul even within the womb of his mother. Srila Vyasadeva knew that the child, after his birth, would not stay at home. Therefore, he, Vyasadeva, pressed upon him the synopsis of the Bhagavatam so that the child could be made attached to the transcendental activities of the Lord. After his birth, the child was still more educated in the subject of the Srimad Bhagavatam by recitation of the actual poems. The idea is that generally the liberated souls are attached to the feature of impersonal Brahman, with a monistic view of becoming one with the Supreme Whole. But by the association of pure devotees like Vyasadeva, even the liberated soul becomes attracted to the transcendental qualities of the Lord. By the mercy of Srila Srinarada, Srila Vyasadeva was able to narrate the great epic of Srimad Bhagavatam, and by the mercy of Vyasadeva, Shukadeva Goswami was able to grasp the import. The transcendental qualities of the Lord are so attractive that Srila Shukadeva Goswami became detached from being completely absorbed in impersonal Brahman and positively took up the personal activities of the Lord. Practically, he was thrown from the impersonal conception of the Absolute, thinking within himself that he had simply wasted so much time in devoting himself to the impersonal feature of the Lord Supreme. Or in other words, he realized more transcendental bliss with the personal feature than the impersonal. And from that time, not only did he himself become very dear to the Vishnu Janas, or devotees of the Lord, but also the Vishnu Janas became very dear to him. The devotees of the Lord, who do not wish to kill the individuality of the living entities, and who desire to become personal servitors of the Lord, do not very much like the impersonalists. And similarly, the impersonalists who desire to become one with the Supreme are unable to evaluate the devotees of the Lord. Thus, from time immemorial, these two transcendental pilgrims have sometimes become competitors. In other words, each of them likes to keep separate from the other because of the ultimate personal and impersonal realizations. Therefore, it appears that Srila Shukadeva Goswami also had no liking for the devotees. But since he himself became a saturated devotee, he desired always the transcendental association of the Vishnu Janas. And the Vishnu Janas also liked his association, since it became a personal Bhagavata. Thus both the son and the father were completely cognizant of transcendental knowledge in Brahman, and afterwards both of them became absorbed in the personal features of the Supreme Lord. The question as to how Shukadeva Goswami was attracted by the narration of the Bhagavatam is thus completely answered by this sloka. Srila Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Srila Vyasadeva, was not only transcendently powerful, he was also dear to the devotees of the Lord. Thus he underwent the study of this great narration, Srimad Bhagavatam. Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Vrasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatunde Ve Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Satarane. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Chatura Vida Bhajante Mam Janasakritina Arjuna Artha Jignasi Artharati Gyani Cha Bharatarshava. There are four kinds of pious people approach Krishna. They're known as the materialists, or those who are participating in Varna and Ashram. They're pious because they're participating in following Krishna's instructions according to the Varna and Ashram system. The beginner is those who are distressed. Anyone who identifies themselves, they're known as artists, distress. Anyone who's in the Bali concept of life must be in distress. Because although we're trying to enjoy the body, it gives us much more pain than it gives us pleasure. Isn't that right? We have practical experience that even everything seems to be going our way, but suddenly there's an accident, and that's what we have to talk about. So, why do we misidentify ourselves with this gross or subtle body? Because we're attached to our designations. We believe that my body, along with its designations, will actually make me happy somehow or another by an arrangement. And lacking the higher taste, any higher taste. Well, actually, in the material world, there are three modes of material nature, and actually one taste of one mode is supposed to be higher than the taste of the other mode. Although actually, it's questionable sometimes, because people enjoy the modes of material nature, and none of them are actually enjoyable. They asked Prabhupada one time, what is the happiness in the mode of goodness? Because that's what it says in the Bhagavad Gita. Sattvam, what does it say? Tatra satvena maladvat, prakashikam anamayam, sukha sangena bananti, jnana yogena chagnaga. That the mode of goodness is sattvam, tattva sattva sattve, nimaladvat. It's purer than the others. Tattva sattve nimaladvat, prakashikam anami. And it gives one knowledge, illumination. Sukha sangena bananti. And those who are in that mode of goodness, they become conditioned by a sense of happiness. So they asked Prabhupada, what is the sense of happiness in the mode of goodness? And Prabhupada's replied is, if you think you're happy in the mode of goodness, then you're in ignorance. The absence of misery is not really happiness. But it's more happiness than you get. It's more relief from misery than you get from ignorance or passion. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nishoshiti Nakangshiti Samak Sarveshu Bhuteshu Madbhaktim Lavate Param. If one can come to the platform of goodness, sattva, then one becomes prasanatma. Prasanna means joyful. Joyful atma, a happy soul. But that happiness is not positive happiness. It's the happiness one gets from, for instance, probably gives the example in one lecture, being released from a prison. Now, if you're in a prison and the food's not very good, it's cold, the guards are not very friendly, then it's not a very happy life. But if released from prison and that unhappy life is ended, then you feel a sense of liberation from the misery. But it's not positive happiness. But compared to the other state of being, we consider it happiness. It's like no one runs down the street with their arms out saying, I don't have any teeth aches today. My teeth are completely fine. I'm completely happy. But if you get a toothache, you run to the dentist crying, oh, save me, oh great soul. I'm suffering. And then when the tooth is cured, you forget about it after some time, and there's no positive happiness by not having a toothache. But there's a lot of pain when you do have one. And when the tooth is suddenly there's no more pain, no one feels a sense of relief, which we call happiness. So the material world is in the mode of ignorance, of which anyone who's identified with this body, to some degree or another, including Krishna says Brahma, must be experiencing the pain of bodily identification, if only the fear of dying, of having to leave this body. No one is looking forward to leaving this body unless one is a self-realized soul. Because this is all we know. No one wants to give up their one and only asset, which is their material body at this present time. And then if we expand it to Ato Griha Kshetra Sitapto Vitera, if we expand it to Ato Griha, our house, our field, our land, Ato Griha Kshetra Sitapta, our children, Vitai, our wealth, then we get even more attached to these things because they protect ourselves. In other words, our real fear is that if we give up this body, what's going to happen to me? Because this is our asset. This is what we've invested so much time and money into. This is what we're able to get a little bit of pleasure out of by eating, sleeping, mating, defending. And we don't mind, well, we do mind all the different problems we go through, but we just tolerate because we have no choice. Now, if one is able to conquer the mind, and how to conquer the mind? Well, first of all, one has to give up sinful activity. According to Bhagavad Gita, the progress of conquering the mind is Yesham antikatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva mohinir muktva bhajante mam drida vritaha. Yesham antikatam papam. Those who have given up previous sinful activities. So how does the previous sinful activities manifest in our present lifetime? Does anyone know?
By desire to do it again.
That's certainly one of them. There's a number of things. Avidya is the first thing, ignorance. And because we're in ignorance, we don't know who we are. Therefore, we accept so many different designations. This is called asmita. Just like Sanatana Goswami, he was imprisoned by the Nawab Hussain Shah, and he was in jail, and he wanted to get out of jail. So he wanted to bribe the jailkeeper. So he told the jailkeeper that, my dear jailkeeper, since you're a learned scholar, you know that if you let a person out of prison, you also become liberated. So this man was not a learned scholar, he was a fool. But because he was given the designation of a learned scholar, therefore he accepted it. Very good, I'm a learned scholar. And therefore Sanatana Goswami tried to trick him into letting him go by flattering him. And he accepted it because he was a fool. Similarly, sometimes people say, oh, you're so beautiful, you're so intelligent, you're so talented, and we accept it. Because basically speaking, we're all crazy. Because we identify with this body, and whatever this body can do, we think we're doing. So that's called ignorance. And we think if I give up this body, I lose all these good qualities I think I have. I think I lose all these assets I think I have. But actually, it's just an imagination that these are mine, just like I may think I have a bank balance somewhere. I have some money in the bank. But what can I do? If I leave this body, I can't go to the bank first and withdraw the money and take it with me. So it's just an imagination that this is actually under my control, because at any moment it might be out of my control. In any case, we're attached to this idea that this is mine, and I am this body, and these things that pertain to the body happen to be mine. So to conquer sinful reactions, as Prabhupada gives the formula and the purport, that one has to begin actual religious life. Religion comes from the Latin word regulate, to regulate one's life. And how do we regulate? We regulate by regulating our desire. That's all we can actually do. We can accept superior desire, or you can accept inferior desires that come through the mind. It's simply a question of what we're going to pay attention to and become enthusiastic about. Or as Prabhupada writes, in the Krishna book, the art of Krishna consciousness is the art of focusing one's attention and then giving one's love to Krishna. So love has many varieties. One of them is enthusiasm. The other is care, what we actually care about. That's where our love is. Just like nowadays, people sometimes, they don't care about their family very much, but their fluffy little dog, that's where they actually put their love into. That's what they're really worried about. Because the dog apparently is always obedient, he licks me when I come home. He seems to be more affectionate than the other members of my family. Therefore, actually, I'm more loving towards my dog. Ooh, Sufi, you're so cute. Than even to my own family members. But even to them I show some love, because they massage my false ego, hopefully, to one degree or another. But I've learned this by my condition, by my instructions I've gotten since childhood. You're supposed to love your family members, etc., etc. And there's a minimum of training like that nowadays, hopefully. I don't know. It's diminished greatly since the Vedic culture has disappeared. Hopefully, because even the tigers and the lions, they're somewhat attached to their children. Of course, that has diminished greatly in Kali Yuga. But in any case, theoretically, we can accept it. It's still existing to one degree or another. And we learn that how we're supposed to treat each other according to the culture we have. In a cultured society, for instance, old people are protected, women are protected, children are protected, diseased people are protected. But I don't think, and something like that is still in society. Previously, men used to open the door to let women in. Now, I don't know if that's still common very much. Some idea was there. So that's learning, and that's called culture, and that's called some idea comes through our mind, is a nice thing to do, is a proper thing to do. So as I said before, there's a difference between how men and women see things. Women see things that if they feel good, then they do the right thing. And men have the different vision. When they do the right thing, then they feel good. Therefore, there has to be some allowance for these different mentalities so that one can actually make progress to doing the right thing and feeling the right way. Now, that's called culture, and family structure is supposed to give culture, not the internet, because the internet is full of uncivilized ideas, degraded ideas. It's supposed to be trained up by cultured families. That was called the Varnashram Dharma, the training of the family, how to become cultured, how the women could be protected so they feel good, so they do the right thing, and how men should be willing to do the right thing so that they feel good, duty and dharma. Now, the worst thing, unfortunately, which is prominent in modern society, is illicit sex, intoxication, meat and gambling. This is what people are trained for most part in the world. Even in India nowadays, they're being misled. And therefore, to learn something in the beginning of religion, because religion is supposed to be teaching us mercy, truthfulness, cleanliness, and austerity. And it's a little bit there. They have holidays where you're supposed to control your eating at least. In certain religions, they don't allow intoxication, etc. So there's some regulation, but not very serious nowadays. In any case, the beginning of actual real religion means to control the senses, which means to stop desiring to fulfill these desires of illicit sex, intoxication, eating and gambling, and try to act properly by being merciful to all living entities, by being austere, controlling the senses, not overeating, not oversleeping, and being truthful and being clean. Now, that's not the end of self-realization. That's only to live, to have an opportunity to become a human being again, to become a human being. And the next stage has to be that one has to act piously. Just like I said, either we could see a beautiful woman on the street and try and make a proposal towards her, or we could sell her a book. Two things are possible. Many things are possible, but these are two main things. Either we can engage this attractive lady in Krishna service, or we could try to exploit her. Similarly, vice versa. So that's our decision, and that will depend upon who we think we're a servant of. Now, 99% of the people in the world are servants of their senses, and they engage us in service to the disciplic succession of our senses. In other words, Maya, as one, she has unlimited representatives, and she distributes many more books than we do on Amazon and whatever else there is. She has, and they're all aimed at gratifying people's senses for the most part. There may be some of Prabhupada's books or other such books, but for the most part, most of the books are just, and most of the instructions are how to eat, sleep, mate, and defend in one way or another. Now, to act piously, generally speaking, means to, beginning with protecting cows. If one doesn't protect the cows, if he doesn't protect the ladies, if he doesn't protect the old people, if one doesn't protect sick people, if it doesn't protect children, there's no question of piety. Therefore, in this age, there is no piety whatsoever, practically speaking, because people think that the aim is to exploit these people, these different categories, not to protect them. But if one can protect the cows, the women, the old people, the sick people, the children, etc., then the air will become clean, the water will become pure, the food will become clean, the relationships will become more civilized, more considerate, at least, more appreciative. And that's called pious life. You can't be pious just by donating food to the Red Cross, donating money to the Red Cross when they utilize it for sinful activities. That's not piety. Now, piety is not the end of the example. Now we come to the monists, those who have conquered their mind. Because that's the next stage. Prabhupada says, conquer sinful reactions. So first there is acting religiously, then acting piously, then conquering sinful reactions. And we do that by tolerance, by knowledge and tolerance. By knowledge that my mind is crazy, and if I follow my mind, I'm also crazy. Then I become crazy like my mind if I follow it. And if I negate my mind, if I don't listen to it, I don't take it seriously, I realize it's just the illusory mind, which is identifying itself with the gross and subtle body, and therefore causing us lust or anger or greed or madness or illusion or envy or something. Just ignorance, different varieties of ignorance and passion. Then that's all right, but that's probably we're not able to hold that for too long in Kali Yuga. Unless one can think of something positively, as Krishna explains himself in Bhagavad Gita, to see with the transcendental vision, then I won't be able to be on the neutral platform for very long. For that reason, Shukadeva Goswami was afraid of getting out of the womb, although he was on the neutral platform. He didn't identify himself with his gross and subtle body, the covering at least, if he had any covering, which I doubt. But he didn't want to go out of the womb of his mother because he thought, I'll get into bad association and I'll start desiring like they do and I'll get entangled in material existence, although right now I'm liberated. So liberated people like to stay with each other because they don't entangle each other. But Shukadeva Goswami didn't really have such association, therefore he was afraid, I'll get out. And although my father guarantees me I won't get into trouble, but after all, he's a householder, and you can't trust householders because they've gotten into trouble themselves, so how can he assure me? Not that householders are bad, but householders are supposed to be, as we find out in the pastime of Shukadeva Goswami. At least theoretically, they're supposed to be in Maya. Otherwise, how can they be householders? They don't necessarily have to be in Maya, but for the better part of household life is meant for people who have who are in illusion to one degree or another, which is normal. 99.99% of the people are in illusion, so therefore it's not an illusion. It's not unusual for someone to become a householder. The question is whether they're utilizing that position to become liberated or not. There's nothing wrong with becoming a householder, because one can utilize that situation to become liberated by following the duties of a household life. But Shukadeva Goswami was beyond household life, and therefore he was a little afraid that he might inadvertently become influenced by his father, and therefore he was reluctant. He didn't actually understand the glories of Vyasadeva at that time. In any case, when he did get out of the womb, and he passed by these ladies who were all bathing and naked, Shukadeva Goswami passed by, and the ladies didn't cover themselves because they understood that he was innocent. He didn't see men and women. He saw the spiritual being, the soul within everyone's heart, and the super soul. and therefore he didn't take the coverings very seriously. It's like, generally speaking, people don't get agitated if they see a red dress or a blue dress. It makes no difference to them. They're neutral towards red dress, blue dress. It's the same. So one who's liberated from the material concept of life, men and women are not distractions, because we're not men and we're not women. These are just dresses we have on. Subtle and gross dresses. Therefore, but when Vyasadeva passed by, the ladies immediately covered themselves. So Vyasadeva was surprised because he was also a liberated soul. He said, when my son passed by, you didn't cover yourselves, but now you're covering yourself when I'm passing by. So why? They said, because you're a householder. And you're supposed to be, householders are generally taken for granted. They're supposed to be in Maya, otherwise they wouldn't be householders. Doesn't mean if you're not a householder, you're not in Maya, but at least household life means you're supposed to discriminate between men and women. There's supposed to be a difference. To become liberated, as Krishna says, Jitatmana prasantasya paramatma samahita shitoshna sukadukeshu tatamana pamanayo. For one who's conquered the mind, it's the best of friends. For one who's failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. So how to become liberated? How do we conquer the mind? Do we find the mind, somehow or another, get a subtle sword, and stick it into the mind and kill it, and the mind, you killed me. The mind, we see a subtle body fall on the ground, dead. The mind's dead. No, we conquer the mind by taking shelter of the supersoul, through knowledge and detachment. And Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, we sharpen our sword of knowledge, we sharpen our sword of detachment, and, what is that? 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So there's two things. There is determination and detachment to cut down the illusory tree of material existence. And we sharpen that with the sword. We sharpen our sword to cut down the tree with knowledge. Knowledge of Paramatma, knowledge of Bhagavan, knowledge of Brahman. With that knowledge, as more we get knowledge, then we become detached and we can cut down the tree with the sword of detachment. Sword of determination, the weapon of detachment. So we sharpen the weapon of detachment with the sword, with knowledge. So the sword of detachment we sharpen with knowledge, and then we can cut down the tree of material misconceptions. And the way where do we get the weapon of detachment of knowledge? By hearing from Krishna and his representatives, taking their direction. So actually, what happens when we take shelter of Krishna, either through some yoga process and follow his directions, then we become detached from the material world. Does anyone know a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam that says that? It's one of the first things that sages ask about. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Priyojitaha Savai Pumso Pro Dharmo Yito Bhakti Rahochide Ahaitu Kya Pratiyata Yayatma Samprasidyati. The supreme occupational engagement for all living entities is that of devotional service. Is that I would say? Savai pumso pro dharmo ito bhakti ahokshate. Bhakti, devotional service. By such devotional service, one acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from this world. And Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Priyojitaha Jana Yatnyai Sivai Ragyam Jnana Chatad Apahaitukam. The supreme occupational dharma for all humanity is that which men can obtain to the loving devotional service under this transcendent law. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. By rendering devotional service under the personality of God at Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge, detachment from the world. So, first thing, devotional service should be what? What's that? And? Yeah, uninterrupted. So devotional service should be unmotivated, uninterrupted. And then what happens? One acquires causeless knowledge and detachment. So how do we get uninterrupted and unmotivated service? Through causeless knowledge and detachment. And that when we utilize that causeless knowledge and detachment, take shelter of Krishna, and then by doing devotional service, we get more causeless knowledge and detachment. Therefore, activities performed in knowledge strengthen one's advancement in real knowledge. We have some knowledge, we have some faith, we have some proclivity towards devotional service, and when we apply that, then we get more knowledge, more proclivity, more faith. In other words, if we invest in devotional service, then our asset of devotional service, a bhakti, will grow. Otherwise, we'll lose we don't lose it, but it'll be covered over. Our spiritual assets will become covered by the accumulation of material desires. So, conquering the mind means to take shelter of knowledge coming from the Supersoul and following his directions. And if we follow his directions by some yoga process, then the result is that we acquire causeless knowledge and detachment. The more it becomes unmotivated and uninterrupted, then we get more and more knowledge and detachment, which inspires us to perform more and more devotional service without interruption and without motivation. Therefore, when Prahlad Maharaj was offered a benediction, what did he ask for? Give me a house, give me a wife, give me a color TV, Om Jai Jagadish Hari. Is that what he asked for? What's that? Bless his father. That he asked for also. But Krishna was already going to bless his father. But what did Prahlad Maharaj want personally? He wanted that his devotional service become stronger and steadier. That's all he wanted. So if we do that, then the result is we conquer our minds. Then Krishna will conquer the mind. Evam gyatva Tasmat evam gyatva kritam karma. Evam bude puram budva samstabhyatmanam atmana jehi shatru mahabaho kamrupam darasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to one's material mind and intelligence, one should conquer, one should evam bude puram budva samstabhyatmana atmana. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material mind and senses, one should control the lower self by the higher, and thus by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. In other words, if we identify ourselves as the servant of Krishna, which includes our spiritual identity, the idea of our being a spiritual personality, then evam bude puram budva samsamyatmana atmana, evam idam bude param jitva. Evam bude param bhutva. Evam bude param bhutva, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind, and intelligence. Almighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence and thus conquer the sensual, thus by spiritual strength, conquer the sensual enemy known as lust. So our first business is to know ourselves to be transcendental to the material minds, material intelligence, mind, and senses, and thus take shelter of Krishna. And by taking shelter of Krishna, by performing the activities that he desires us to do, we can conquer this. In Krishna, when we come into the spiritual energy, then material nature goes away, we could say, or gets burnt up, however you want to look at it. In the fire of ecstasy, of becoming absorbed in Krishna consciousness, all the reactions, itaidam so sam rido ganira, basmat sakrute jana, ganagni sarvakarmani, basmat sakrute tada. As the blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, so does the fire of transcendental knowledge burn to ashes all the reactions of our previous activities. So by taking shelter of Krishna, becoming absorbed in the ecstasy of becoming conscious of Krishna, all our impurities in the heart are burnt away. And the result is we can see things properly and we experience transcendental happiness. We become free from the misery of lust, anger, greed, illusion, etc. So Shukadeva Goswami was on that platform, but that wasn't the end of the story, as we find out. Eventually he got even a higher taste by taking shelter of Krishna. As a liberated soul, when he came in contact with Krishna, he immediately became attracted. Just like when the fillings, the metal is cleansed of rust, then immediately becomes attracted to the magnet. So Krishna is like the magnet. We ourselves, the soul, is like little pieces of iron. And when we become purified of our misgivings, our material conceptions, then we automatically become extremely attracted to Krishna because he's a reservoir of all pleasure and all love and all good qualities. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna, thank you Maharaj for the lecture. I have one question about controlling speech.
Yes.
So, what are some practical things that I can do to be more conscious of what I speak and how I speak to people?
Memorize this verse from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, text number 15. Let me see if I got that verse right. It's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, verse number 15. That's right. Anuvega karam vakyam sattva priyitam chayat swadaya abhyasanam jaiva vangmanat tap uchite. So memorize that verse. Anu means continuously, and vega means pushing. So anuvega karam vakyam. One should not agitate people's minds when we're talking to them. Anuvega karam vakyam sattva. And what we should say should be truthful. Sattvam priya, and it should be pleasing. Hitam, and should be beneficial. Satyam priya hitam chayat, swaraya abhyasanam chaiva, and it should be in accordance with the Vedic knowledge, especially our books, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we should listen to ourselves speaking and see if my speech is pleasing, if it's beneficial, if it's truthful, it's according to the Vedas, if it's Krishna conscious, and it doesn't agitate people's minds. If you check off all those boxes, your speech is perfect. Anything else? Yes.
Do you understand? I mean,
Well, not exactly, because Srila Vyasadeva, Bhakti Yogena Manasi, we're in the 7th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he's already gone through the 5th chapter. Oh, actually, in this chapter is where Bhakti Yogena Manasi, we've already just gone through that he was situated in trance and he saw directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore he saw all the living entities and he saw Maya, and he compiled Srimad Bhagavatam. So he was absorbed in love of Krishna. Pretty advanced. But he was taking the part of a householder. So he had to play like a householder. You can't take a part. If you're hired for a play, you're supposed to be, you're supposed to be the good fairy. Well, you decide during the play, you decided you don't like the role of good fairy. You start playing the role of the wicked witch of the West. Then you're not playing the role very well. So Srila Vyasadeva was playing his role expertly as a householder. So apparently, though, he may not be as advanced as Shukadeva Goswami, but they were both playing their roles appropriately. Anything else? Thank you. Gurantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande. The demigods are showering flowers.